Вітаю вас знову на Захід 21, практичній конференції по просуванню на західних ринках. Наступний доповідач у нас Мед Сінгерс. Я дуже хотів би, щоб ви послухали. Доповідь буде англійською. Hey, Mad, how are you?
I am very good. How are you, Victor?
I'm good. Early in the morning, like I told you already. Like, what time is it right now in Vietnam?
In Vietnam, it's 4 p.m., so middle of the day. So good time.
Yeah, it's crazy. In Florida, it's like 4:29, and in Kiev is like plus 7 hours. So yeah. So like you're gonna talk about SEO from a business perspective. Can you just give like one key takeaway from your presentation, or it doesn't make sense, or everyone should just?
Yeah, definitely. So my focus on what I'll talk about today is really how to think of a SEO business from an SEO perspective. So many SEOs spend a lot of time learning SEOs and doing SEOs, but actually not that many turns it into a business that makes them a great living. So what I'm going to do today is basically talk through how you can actually build up a solid business and make a great living and build a great business from it, right? A lot of SEOs love doing SEO, but just doing SEO without really making any money from it is, it might be fun enough, but obviously the goal for most people is to actually build a business. So I'll help go through a lot of that process and go through some of the most important things that I see people not do super well.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. So let's go. I will collect all the questions from people in the chat, and then we'll ask you after you finish. Okay, let's go. Thank you.
Fantastic. Right. So as I said, the presentation is called SEO from a business perspective. So just before we jump into the presentation, I want to just tell you a little bit about myself. So my name is Matt Singers, and I run 5 larger companies and a couple of smaller ones. So the biggest one is called Matt Singers Management Consulting. And basically with that, I teach online business owners how to be effective people managers. So I basically help teach people how to run effective companies. And I've worked with some of the big guys. I've worked with Ahrefs. I've worked with people like Matt Diggity, Kyle Roof, and so on. And I've helped many of these guys actually build solid businesses, all right? Because reality is a lot of people who start with SEO have no business experience. They're not experienced in managing people and so on. And just like everything else, it's a skill to learn, right? I also run a big outsourcing company called Aristo Sourcing. I run a company called Arum SEO, where we basically just do internal SEO. So basically we build sites, grow them, and flip them. Then I bought a content company called Riddle Me Right, which write some of the cheapest native English content that you can get your hands on. And then lastly, I run the SEO Mastery Summit, which is a big, it used to be an online event. This year it's turning into a live event in Saigon in March. So that's the larger companies that I run right now.
Цікавить стратегія лінкбілдингу під нові ринки. Backlinkers – не просто будь-які лінки, а посилання, які вам насправді потрібні. Був негативний досвід лінкбілдингу та не хочете ризикувати повторно? Взагалі новий сайт і важливо побудувати максимально природну та безпечну стратегію, обмежені в ресурсах та часі? Є виділений бюджет, який потрібно ефективно спланувати? Всі ці проблеми вирішить Backlinkers. Залишайте заявку прямо зараз. backlinkers.net/ua.
So, what are we going to talk about today? About how to build your SEO machine, as I call it. So, building your SEO business, right? So, there's 3 core things that I want to talk through that I see people not get right a lot of the time. The first one is picking the right niche, right? The second one is setting up your organization for growth so that you can actually grow your company and your business in an effective manner, right? And lastly, we'll talk a little bit about how to delegate. And we'll do that because many SEOs struggle with this piece. So jumping right into it, niching down the right way. So first of all, what is a niche and how do you pick one, right? So niching down, a lot of people have said it, a lot of people have heard about it, but actually understanding how do you niche down is not necessarily super easy, right? when you're looking at niches, many people think like, oh, well, I'll build websites or I'll do SEO. SEO is a great niche. But fundamentally, what you want to think about when you're thinking about niching down is you want to think about individual processes, right? So, for example, if you want to build websites, or let's say you want to do SEO, the challenge most people have is in the beginning, they do like this. They're like, any clients that needs any kind of SEO, come to me. And they end up often building an agency that serves all kind of customers, all kind of ways, and so on and so forth. Now, the problem with that, and the fundamental challenge with that, is the fact that when you're trying to basically service a large amount of customers, if you're dealing with an e-commerce customer one day and a local business the next day and so on, the skill set required to deliver all of these services is very, very big, right? The things you need to understand and building your processes becomes really, really difficult, all right? So fundamentally, when you're thinking about niche, you want to think about how can I deliver one very specific service to a very specific set of users, and then sticking to that, right? So rather than saying, okay, I only serve these kind of people, and then eventually if someone comes along, you'll take them in, right? Like the people who grow their businesses the fastest and the most effective is people who really hone in and focus on one thing. So let's say you start a business serving just plumbers in the US, and basically your focus is just building their website or just doing SEO for them, right? Or a combination of the two. So the thing is, first of all, if you only deal with plumbers, number one is you start adding a lot more value because you know their business. You start knowing and understanding their jargon. And when you build 10 plumbing websites, you know exactly what a website needs to look like. You know exactly the phrases, you know the top pages. The keyword research you've done for a plumber in Florida is probably very similar to the keyword research for a plumber in Detroit. Right? So you basically start being able to build much more structure and much more sort of foundational processes into your business, because you see you see fundamentally the same pattern over and over again. And fundamentally, some of the people I've worked with, they literally have the exact same content brief for every client. So they know the 20 pieces, 40 pieces, 50 pieces of content they need for a client, and they got it written every time, but they have it all up front, right? They know exactly what works. They know what converts. They know what words to use to convert. And often when they build websites, they've had the opportunity to even do conversion rate optimization, all right? Now, what this does is when you're doing the same thing over and over again, first of all, you can do it cheaper because you know the processes inside out. You can have people who are just dealing with individual pieces of the process. The second thing is you actually add more value. So the clients that you have get more benefit. So fundamentally, instead of you providing a service at a certain cost and you spending X amount of money, what happens is your cost goes down and the value the customer gets goes up, which fundamentally means you can even charge more money. So you can do things for less money, have a bigger impact, and actually charge more money for the same thing, right? So fundamentally, what that enables you to do is when you charge more money, one, you can actually deliver better service, all right? But two, you can invest more money in the likes of marketing, better management, and so on. And therefore, you can actually scale your company much, much better. So this is the core thing with finding a niche, right? Think about a niche as processes. So there's a good few companies out there, for example, that focus on just doing link building or maybe just doing guest posts, for example. And those companies are actually quite often very successful. And it's not just because you make good money doing link building, it's just as much because they focus on individual processes, right? Now, when you master a process and you have, a whole host of clients, very often just mastering one process and keep going on that one process is often the most profitable. But if you do start adding another process after you've managed the first one, right, so you can sell more to the same audience, you put yourself in a position again where you have a little bit more redundancy, you have a little bit more backup in case something happened to your main revenue stream, right? But fundamentally, when you think about niching down, this is how you want to think. What is one process that I can execute again and again in an effective manner, right? Now, the next thing that happens is when you start doing marketing, again, today, everyone's like, hey, we're doing SEO, come to us for SEO. If you target just plumbers, again, as an example, then your marketing becomes so much better because one, you have case studies. You can say, hey, here's how we help 10 other plumbers get amazing results in Google, right? So they can see direct results from people exactly like that. And the target audience you target is, again, it's a very specific niche and it's a very specific target. So finding them, for example, on LinkedIn or searching for their businesses and reaching out and so on becomes so much easier because it's 100% clear exactly what your audience is, right? So that's the value in niching down. And people say it all the time, but don't just think about the niche of we only work with these people. Think about your niching down as a process. What is one process that you can do extremely well and scale it significantly? So, for example, I have a content company where all we do is we write content for basically affiliate SEOs and agencies and so on that needs high volume of content. So generally our clients do a minimum of 100K words a month. And our focus in that company is specifically on writing those type of content. So when we have people who come to us and say, hey, we have some copywriting, can you help? Hey, we have all these other requirements. Can you put pictures into the content? And can you do all this stuff? Our answer is generally no. Because we have one process that we execute repeatedly, and therefore we are extremely good at doing it.
Хочете перевірити 100К доменів на параметри Ahrefs та Majestic за один раз? Не проблема. Підключайте аккаунт Ahrefs та використовуйте спеціальний Integrations Limit, який, до речі, не можна використати в самому Ahrefs. Ціна перевірки становить від 1 до 5 рядків за сайт і залежить від кількості обраних вами параметрів. Треба відсіяти сайти з непотрібним вам гео в пакетній перевірці або проконтролювати їх відсутність у проєкті? Легко. Link-checker по IP визначає великий відсоток таких сайтів, що особливо актуально, якщо вони не належать до національних доменних зон. Впевнені, що серед ваших сабмітів під США немає японських, іранських або навіть російських .com сайтів? Анкор-план виконується неякісно? Одруки, креатив веб-майстрів або просто криві руки виконавців? Додайте Анкор-план в проєкт, і Link-checker покаже вам всі незаплановані анкори та урли. Контролюйте прогрес виконання Анкор-плану, коригуйте задачі та досягайте поставлених цілей. Будуйте якісні лінки разом з Link-checker Pro.
So, next up is setting up your organization for growth. So, when you get to a very narrow niche, when you make sure that you have a good target and you have a good service to deliver, the next thing you want is look at your organization and figure out how can you grow it. So one of the key things, and this is a mistake a lot of people make, is they don't actually charge enough money for their service. They sit down and they're like, if I'm doing this job, I can survive with just $1,000 a month or $2,000 a month or whatever. But they don't think about the fact that when they need to, one, hire other people to do the work, and two, eventually hire managers to manage those people, it still needs to be profitable, right? So setting up from day one, setting up your cost in the right way is very, very important. So knowing and understanding your numbers so you can actually afford not just to deliver the service, but to deliver the service through other people than yourself that are being managed, and also still have budget to do marketing, to do promotional things, to grow your company further is critically important, right? So those are some of the key things that I see people often not take into account when they're starting an SEO company, and particularly agencies or the likes, right? So those things are extremely important to think about and remember, right? Now, next up, we're going to talk about how to delegate effectively, because again, many people are good at doing SEO, but they're not great at delegating. So first of all, you want to get yourself into the right mindset. And unfortunately, there's a lot of guides out there that says, you know, when you hire people, you figure out how to do something, and then you tell them exactly how to do it. And to some extent, that can make sense, right? And maybe when you hire your first employee, that might make a little bit of sense. But fundamentally, you want to learn how to delegate responsibilities instead of delegating tasks, right? Mm-hmm. And what's the difference? What does that actually mean? So when you're delegating a responsibility, it fundamentally means that you're giving people ownership. When you're delegating them a task, you're telling them what to do. So if I use Victor as an example, if I say, hey, Victor, here's a process of how to answer our customer emails. I want you to figure out, sit down, check the videos for this process and start answering customer emails, right? That does not give Victor very much ownership. It doesn't give him very much besides it does give him a day job. But the thing is, he doesn't even know and understand what his goal or his objective is. If I go to Victor instead and I say, Victor, you're great at talking to people. I want you to take responsibility for our customer service process. I want you to own it because I don't have, as a business owner, I don't have the time to answer our customers. And because you're great at it, I want you to be the customer service guy, right? Here's our goals. We need to answer every customer within 24 hours. And we want to make sure that in our customer satisfaction, that we get a good rating. So that's the clear goals, right? Now, if you give a staff member a task like that, they're going to take so much more ownership. They're going to come up with so many more suggestions. And yes, I would still show Victor, this is the process. This is what we do today. But you're a smart human being, so you can probably help make these processes even better, right? So the difference between those two conversations to a staff member is mind-blowing. And SEOs tend to delegate tasks. They tend to delegate, say, do this very specific thing in this very specific way. And because of that, they end up being like the spider in the middle. They end up hiring 3, 4, 5 people, and they're so busy sending things back and forward, checking all the work that's getting done and so on. And that's not how you build a company, right? If you build a company, you have to hire people. You have to delegate responsibility to them so they're responsible for a piece of their business. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't, check on them once in a while. And it doesn't mean that you're not there for them, but you want them to step up. You want them to learn. And the thing is, something like customer service, for example, if that's one of 10 things you do, you don't put a lot of focus on it. But if you delegate that to a staff member, it becomes the most important thing they do. And if they do that day in, day out, over time, they will get better at it than you are. And that is the fundamental focus here. You want to develop your staff to become better at delegating and both delegating their work, but also delivering the work in a way that gets you much better results in the long term, right? So that's how you grow a team, and that's how you grow a business. So the fundamental thing is people always like, oh yeah, I can do this, I'll just do it myself. But when you're building a company, fundamentally you're building a pyramid, right? You're at the top of the pyramid and you're growing the company by having people below you. Now, the way you increase the value of the business is increasing the value of what you do. So if you're sitting doing work that someone can be paid a lot less than you could do, you're wasting company resources. So when you're like, yeah, I'll just take 2 hours to copy paste this information or to do whatever it is you want to do, right? Not giving that responsibility to someone else fundamentally costs your company money. And more importantly, it stops you from doing the most important things in your business. The one question people never ask enough is, what's the one thing I can do to really move my business forward? For a lot of agency owners, particularly in the early days, it's going out finding new customers. But what happens with many agencies is they go find customers and then they spend all their time and energy on serving those customers, right? The challenge by doing that, when you don't have anyone that's responsible for it, is you end up spending all your time on it, right? And then you can't grow the business because you can't keep bringing in new customers and actually growing the business while you're also doing the serving of the customers, right? So generally, you want to focus on doing more value at work. Now, when you start hiring people that develop into managers, they have to do the same. So they need to constantly delegate the least important things, the least valuable things they're doing to the people below you so that they can effectively take more tasks off you, because things that you're doing, everything else being equal, should be more valuable. So when they start doing it, their work becomes more valuable and their value to the organization becomes much bigger, right? So that's critical. The only things that you have to do if you're a manager in a business is one-to-ones with your direct staff and hiring the people that work directly for you, right? Those are the only two things. Now, if you own a company, if you're the business owner, you also need to look at things like strategy, vision, and just company growth and company vision in general, right? But fundamentally, everything else you do can be delegated. And every time I start working with a business and the business owner says, no, I'm the only one that can do this, I can't train anyone to do it, there's one of two issues. Either they make what they're doing too complex, and that's very often. They've never actually sat down and tried to explain it to someone else. And again, look at how would you do that over time. And the second thing is, again, they haven't niched down at all. So they're literally every day is like looking at a new customer with a new problem, and they're constantly trying to do this. And again, you don't want to be doing this if you want to grow an actual business. If you just want to do SEO and effectively grow yourself a well-paid job, great way to do it, right? But if you want to build a business that can operate without you, then that is not the way, right? And with the customers I coach, one of my sort of key challenges to them is always getting to the point where they can take a 1-month holiday and the business being bigger when they return than when they left. All right. So when you're in a situation where you have a team that can bring on new customers, service the customers and so on, and do that when you're not present, that's when you have a real business, right? That's when your business is at a point where even if something should happen to you, the business can continue to run and grow, right? And that's a real business. That's what you call a sellable asset. So if you're ever thinking about selling your company, that's what you want, right? If a company is depending on you being there, selling it is extremely, extremely difficult, right? So what do you generally delegate? So the first three things that I tend to focus on is what can easily be done by other people, right? What are the things that you're doing right now? And very often it's just like, it's just a 5-minute task, I'll just do it. But the thing is, you end up doing 5-minute tasks all the time. So if you force yourself that every time you have something that's relatively simple to do, give it to one of your staff. Let them do it, because if the task ever come up again and they've learned how to do it, they can do it better, even if it takes you longer to do it, right? It's a little bit of chicken and an egg. But fundamentally, the problem for most SEOs, every time you choose to do something yourself, instead of delegating it, you grow in knowledge fundamentally, and you hinder your staff development. So if you're sitting around saying, yeah, I have a bunch of staff, but they're not that good, the reason is usually because you're not delegating to them. You're not giving them enough responsibility and ownership for what they're doing to grow, right? So the way you grow your staff, everyone listening here who is running an SEO company, they learned SEO not by being given a process and say, do this thing, do this thing, do this thing. Someone gave them responsibility. Someone said, can you figure this out? Can you help us do this thing? And then they went and they made some mistakes, right? Now, reality is when you have staff, when you delegate things to staff, sometimes they will make mistakes, right? But the fundamental is that in the end of the day, they will get to a point where they're in a much, much better position, right? And fundamentally, they will get better than you are. So what I love about my businesses is that over time, my staff becomes better than me, and I don't want to do it anymore because I know that if I sit down and do keyword research, someone else in the company is better at doing it. And I rather want the best results, right? So the second thing I look at is doing things that I'm not good at. Most entrepreneurs think they have to always figure things out and then delegate it. But here's the thing. I can promise you the CEO of IBM is not sitting figuring out what 200,000 people have to do and then delegating it to them. The way it works is that when you start owning a business, when you start being a good manager, you learn to delegate tasks that are not yet being done. So if I've never done email marketing before and I want to start doing email marketing, don't sit down and figure out how to do it and then delegate it. Delegate the ownership to someone in your team. So again, if I'm using Victor as an example, if I go to Victor and say, hey, Victor, I love the way you write, like the way you communicate to people is amazing. And I want you to own email marketing. We have never done it before, but I want to do it because I've heard everyone say it's a great thing to do. All right. So I want you to do a project where, number one, you figure out what software we should use. Number two, actually write some of these emails and figure out how do we actually make money from this stuff. Right? And set up good systems and good frameworks so that we can do email marketing ongoingly going forward. Right? When you delegate that to one of your staff members, here's what happens. One, they learn and grow, and they become better at it than you are because you don't know what to do, and you're learning and teaching them become the expert. Now, the most important thing about that is that you can then spend the time you have doing something that's even more valuable to the business, right? So when you really want to grow your business, when you really want to scale, this is what you want to focus on. It's delegating to your staff new responsibilities of things that are not yet done, instead of always trying to figure things out by yourself. And the third thing that I look at is what takes up the most of my time. So if I look at my calendar and my time tracking and I see that 60% of the time, 40% of the time I'm spending goes into one area, that's probably where I want to hire someone next. Because if it takes up 50-60% of my time, it's very likely worth the value of a full-time staff member doing, right? So that's the three things that I start by looking at. But fundamentally, I love sitting down, writing a task list of everything I do, and planning out ahead a year and say a year from now, I don't want to be doing any of those things except from the previous mentioned things, which is one-to-one, hiring people that work directly for me and doing the company vision mission, right? So any other things in that, I want to have a long-term goal on my list saying this task eventually will go to this person, or it could sometimes be a person that is not yet hired. So I could say, I don't have a marketing person right now, but when I have, and I want to do that within the next 12 months, I want to give this work to that marketing person, right? So that is fundamentally how I go around delegating. So again, there's two aspects, right? So there's the things that are already done. So when you already have a process and you know how to do it. Again, just remember, try and give people the responsibility instead of just giving them the task, right? If you feel your staff never adds value, never come up and suggest how to improve processes and so on, it's probably because you have been delegating them tasks instead of delegating them responsibilities, right? And then second, learn how to delegate things that are not being done today. So if you're sitting thinking, oh, this AI content, that sounds great, someone should be doing that. Instead of figuring out yourself, try and delegate it to a staff member. It's a challenge. Excellent. That is all for me. So this is what I have. Now, for March, as I said earlier on, we are running the SEO Mastery Summit. So if you have any chance of showing up in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, we would love to see you around. But generally, yeah, excited to talk to you. I hope you've learned some valuable business lessons. And over to you, Victor. Any great questions?
Do you want to rank higher on Google? Use the power of editorial links. But what are editorial links? These links are the real business's websites. They are not for sale, and you can get them only through building relationships. Let's take a look at the effectiveness of editorial links. Here is the client's website. From May to December, there were 100 links added, and the traffic increased 5-fold. Here is another client.
We grew our GR from 40 to 60. And also we've gained great positions in high competitive keywords. For example, we've been able to go to top 5 for the keyword software development outsourcing, which is like the top keyword you want to rank for in our industry.
Check out the editorial.link website to order editorial links. Editorial.link. Powerful links, cosmic results.
Thank you so much for a good presentation. Actually, it's like some of the stuff is like really actual to us, you know, because we start in this like niche agencies, like we have like a lot of them, like, you know, like, but yeah, but we don't position them like, I mean, I think I'll talk to you after if we. Yeah, so I have the questions. First one, what soft and hard skills does the manager need to have a success in this sphere? I mean, I think they meant in SEO.
Yeah. So fundamentally, management is a skill like everything else, right? I have a lot of SEOs coming to me and like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to manage people. I just want to do SEO. Right. And honestly, most people, when they learn how to manage people, they change their mind. They're like, wow, now I can get a lot more done without having to do it myself. Right. That's great. So management is a skill like everything else. And what that means is that it's a skill that you need to learn. Right. So obviously, I'm not the only one out there teaching management. There's lots of great books. There's lots of great resources on it. But I've put together like a training course that I get all my clients through, and it's literally 5 hours, right? So I'm not saying you're going to be a management expert in 5 hours, but you will learn, similar to some of the delegation stuff I've talked about, you will learn how to master the key processes, and then it's about practice to put them into life, right? But the fundamental is that anyone can learn to become a good manager, but it takes time, just like it takes time to become a good SEO. What I would say is, if you want to really be a business owner, if you want to make significant money, it's definitely a much, much better route to go down, and spending some time and money to become a good manager, to learn how to hire great people and delegate well to them and so on, is extremely, extremely valuable, right? Yeah. So yeah, it's generally, in my experience, it's worth the effort. And if you ask any of the clients I've worked with, they would say the same, right?
Yeah. I absolutely agree. Like first, our speech was from Dmitry Bonder. He's like was talking about management. Like the more our conference goes, like the more it's like because it makes sense, you know. When some of the people had like 10 people teams, you know, it was okay. Now some people have 1,000 people teams, and it's like really hard, you know, like, and if you don't like delegate, and you know, it's not gonna work. Yeah. So
there's many steps throughout it, right? But finding the right business model initially makes everything else easier. Second step is hiring great people makes your life amazingly easier, right? So that those two steps alone are so extremely valuable. And if you then learn how to manage them extremely well, then that's really the 3 steps for business success, right?
Thanks. Next question. What do you think about AI copywriters? It's just random question from the chat. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is definitely going to change the landscape of SEO quite a bit. I definitely see that, you know, and I mean, where we moved the last 12 months. So 12 months ago to now, huge jumps, right? I can't even imagine where we're going to be a year from now. Like they said, the next version of GPT-4 should be 100 times better than the current one. So I cannot even imagine what that looks like, right? So I'm sure it will change the landscape. Again, a lot of people's like, oh no, it will be the death of SEO and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, no, you might look at doing things differently, but that's been the same with every major Google update that happened. You know, I started doing SEO in 2007, so I've been through pandas and penguins and lots of different updates, and things changes over time. But the key thing is, if you're at the forefront, even if you get hit really hard, what happens is that you are at the front, right? You can learn, how do I work with the new landscape, and how do I optimize for the new landscape? And if you're ahead of the curve, everything else being equal, there'll always be space for some SEOs in there. And the more you're ahead, the better situation you're in, right? Will it change 100%? Will time and effort be going towards different aspects? I believe so, yeah. I think personally, link building probably becomes even more important than it have to been in the past, because reality is, if people can spit out 2 million word sites in a matter of minutes, right? Yeah. The only way Google can differentiate is saying, who have been around the longest, who have the most authority and trust, and that's typically built from links, right? So I believe personally that if you asked me a year ago about link building, I would say, yeah, it probably becomes less and less important because Google is looking more at entities and more at all this stuff. Honestly, I think now it's the other way around. Google is going to get forced to look more at links again at some point.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for answer. Next one, what is the best niche for starting in 2023?
I don't believe there's a best niche, to be honest. I think I generally look at SEO in different buckets, right? So you can specialize in providing services to SEOs. So again, you could do link building, or you could, something I think that's very valuable now is schema. Right. So a lot of people don't know how to work with schema and how to do it well. So if you set up an agency and just specialize in doing schema really well, you could probably make a fair chunk of cash, right? So you can look at specific skills like that. I think if you're looking at doing SEO itself, local SEO is probably what have the lowest barrier to entry. So if you're brand new to SEO and don't know much about it, learning how to do local SEO is probably the simplest. Yeah. So growing and scaling an agency doing local SEO is probably the sort of simplest way if you want to work with end user clients. So yeah, that was a couple of sort of ideas.
And when you said agency for plumbers, and I understand because you spend less time on doing the same work because you have already this framework and you understand the niche, so you can build a good website, optimize it with the less time. But what about sales manager, sales for this niche? When you delegate someone, would you pick someone who already was for example, in cannabis niche, we were looking for people that used to grow or they were previously working in the same niche, so they know how to talk to their clients. So my question is, will you look for someone who already been in this niche, or someone who you can delegate and they will onboard on their own?
You can do either. There's not a right or wrong, right? You can find a great sales guy can sell a lot of stuff. So if you find a really great sales guy and you teach him SEO, or you don't need to teach him SEO, but teach him what he needs to know to sell what you're selling, right? That's an option. It's definitely also an option to go out and find, let's say you work with plumbers and eventually there's some guy who doesn't want to do plumbing anymore, trying to bring someone like that on board. Obviously, they know the lingo, they know all the struggles of plumbers, so they probably have a good way to talk to other plumbers, right? Either can work. The main thing is, again, you need to find someone great who fits in your company and so on. But I don't think there's a right or wrong way of doing that. It's just about finding great people that have, it's different advantages, right? If you know the niche well, great. If you're a great sales guy, great. If you have both of those skills, amazing, right? So, but in most cases, you won't find a great plumber who's also an amazing sales guy who also understands SEO straight away, right? There will probably not be too many of them. And if they're there, they'll probably be charging very, very high hourly rates, right? So often as a business, you need to do one or the other. But fundamentally, you can teach people things, right? I would probably say fundamentally, it's probably harder to teach sales than it is to learn to understand how to talk to plumbers. Right. So you're probably better getting a good sales guy than you were finding a plumber and teaching them sales, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. About people, when you say hire the right people, like we came up with the thing like that values for us filters most of the people, like that are not relevant to our company. Let's say we have like values, we have competences. Like if you go down, we have like junior supposed to look like this, middle supposed to look like this, team lead like this. So what do you think about this? When you say find the right people, how do you understand what's the right person for you? Like what?
Yeah. So it's a big thing. I spend a lot of time in my management consult talking about this. So the first thing is I spend a lot of time on behaviors and learning to understand people's behaviors. All right. Because what you want to do generally is you want to try and put the right type of people in the right jobs. So a person who's a great sales guy is rarely the same guy who's great at putting numbers into Excel or being an accountant, right? It's two very natural, different skill sets. So learning how to understand sort of people's natural behaviors is really, really beneficial for putting the right type of people into the right roles. Now, when you understand getting the right type of people, then the next step is looking at, do they have the right attitude? Do they have the right mentality? Do they have the right values to fit your company? And that's, for me, typically the second step, right? So there's a fair chunk of stuff to go through in terms of finding the right people. But overall, it's if you hire great people, like if I hired you, for example, to be a roofing sales guy, it probably wouldn't go amazingly well. It's not because you're not a great guy, but just you're not a natural, crazy sales guy that runs around and talks to everyone everywhere, right? Now, if I hired you to run some projects or something like that, it would probably be a lot better because you're very good at organizing things and sort of making sure things happen, right? So again, just knowing and understanding different people is probably the biggest game changer when it comes to recruitment and in terms of hiring the right people and so on.
Okay. Thank you for answer. What soft and hard skill does the manager need to have for having success in particular niche? This also. You already.
Just let me add one more to that one, right? So what I would say is most people promote the best skilled people, and that's fine if they're also skilled at management or if they want to get into management. But what I would say is that what often holds most people back from being a great manager is understanding the work too much. Because just like SEOs micromanage other people, if someone knows how to do link building extremely well and they hire someone else to do link building, they often end up micromanaging much easier, right? Compared to if you're hiring someone or promoting someone that doesn't actually know how to do the job, but is good at managing people, they will often get better results out of their staff, right? So if you're looking at going pure managers, you're often sometimes better with people who haven't actually done the job. It's not necessarily the best at the job because that way they're not constantly trying to correct everyone, right? Now, one small caveat to that, like fundamentally, I love growing my companies from the ground up. Now, the thing is, when you have people in your business, you want to get to a point where you're starting to develop them to go into management before they're there, right? So you want to start developing them and help them grow into a management role before they're actually there. So there's no need and there's no point in waiting, developing people until they get the management job in management. If you develop them before they get the job, then they will generally get significantly better results.
Thank you so much for answering the questions. Remind me again, SEO Mastery Summit in Vietnam. What are the dates and what will be there?
It's the 1st to the 3rd of March. We have lots of big speakers. So we have Matt Diggity is coming along. We have Kyle Roof. We have Charles Float. We have Alicia that's also speaking here. Lots and lots of big speakers, amazing speakers. And we're covering many assets of SEO. So it's not just affiliate or local or whatever. We're covering many aspects of it. But March 1st to the 3rd next year. And great opportunity to meet, network, and get to know a lot of other SEOs. And networking is the best way to grow your business, really. So,
Makes sense. Thank you so much again for sharing like your information like with our audience and like for answering the questions. And I wish you to make that conference like really good in Vietnam and talk to you soon, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Victor.
Yeah. Thank you so much.